Good evening, Black people and all allies fighting for Black liberation, Black prosperity, and Black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. Just days before the President and Vice President are set to travel to Atlanta to deliver what could be a major speech on voting rights, several Georgia activists are out with a bold message to both of them. Don't come here unless you have a real plan to get voting rights passed. The groups released this statement, which reads in part, "We reject any visit by President Biden that does not include an announcement of a finalized voting rights plan that will pass both chambers, not be stopped by the filibuster, and be signed into law. Anything less is insufficient and unwelcome." So, as President Biden and Vice President Harris plan their visit to Georgia, our message is simple. We have voted, we have advocated, and we have organized. We have done the work. Now it is time for you to deliver and for you to do the work. And as a showdown looms between Democrats and Republicans on January 17th, the day Schumer said he will force a vote on the filibuster if Republicans keep blocking voting rights legislation, Politico is reporting that former presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and even Oprah Winfrey have been working the phones trying to sway Manchin to budge on the filibuster. Joining me now to discuss is the former state president of the Georgia NAACP, Reverend James Woodall, and opinion columnist for The Guardian and The Grio, Michael Harriot. Reverend, you were one of the people who signed the statement to Biden and Harris. Why did you guys feel it important to put that statement forward now before they arrive?
Well, first, Charles, thank you for having me on the show tonight. Quite frankly, we're just pissed off, right? We're pissed off because we showed up in so many ways during a public health pandemic. We saw ourselves organizing against all odds. People said Black folk wouldn't show up to vote not once but twice. People said that Warnock and Ossoff had no chance in hell to be able to get elected to serve in the U.S. Senate. And quite frankly, we went out and above and beyond the call of duty to ensure that democracy had a chance to survive. And in this moment right now, we're seeing again proliferation of attacks against democracy, not just talking about January 6, 2021, but we are seeing laws proposed in the session that begins next week here in Georgia, and there's still no action. We did our part, and now it's time for both the White House and Congress to do theirs. And so, with the president and the vice president set to come here
Right.
next week, we want them to come here to tell us that there is a chance, there is a way, there is a plan for us to be able to get the For the People Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act passed. Otherwise, there's nothing they can tell us that we don't already know.
So, Michael, I want to know your opinion of what you think is going to happen then. They have not been speaking in forceful ways about voting rights. They did mention it in their, their speeches yesterday on 1/6, but they haven't been speaking directly to Manchin, not in public. They may have been doing all sorts of things behind the scenes, but there have been no public, admonitions of him, no saying chastising of him. They're going to come tomorrow, next week anyway. So, what do you think that this sets up for the Biden administration and these
Well,
Black voter activists in Georgia?
I think, I think the activists in Georgia showed them exactly what to do, right? They should put the kind of pressure on Manchin that the activists in Georgia put on the president and the vice president, right? Get your stuff together. Don't come in here playing around when we already been doing the work. And that's what the Democratic Party should be telling Joe Manchin. Don't come in here playing with these votes when we've been out here doing the work. And so I think, the activists showed them what to do now. What as to what they will do, I think they'll come in, they'll give the usual rhetoric. But I think, the Democratic Party needs to see that it isn't the responsibility of activists on the ground to fight voter suppression. It's for them to organize and get people to vote, but it's for government and Congress and officials to fight voter suppression so that the people who want to vote can be represented. So I think we'll see, we'll have to see something different. We don't know what that is yet, I think they have to be more forceful than the rhetoric they've been putting out lately.
Reverend Golo, one thing that activists have been demanding of the president is that he put more pressure directly on Manchin to alter or eliminate the filibuster. But what we have now have are reports that former presidents like Obama and Clinton are putting the pressure on, and talk show hosts like Oprah Winfrey. I don't want to call her just a talk show host; she's a legend. But talk show hosts instead of the sitting president doing the pressuring. What do you make of that?
Well, our job is to simply organize our communities and participate in democracy. And democracy is more than just a transaction of vote for this candidate to get this outcome. It's about, you know, ensuring that we have the kind of legislative priorities like healthcare for our communities, ensuring that people who are incarcerated are not, violating their humanity, their human rights are not being violated while they're serving their sentences. It's talking about a equitable economy, right? And so during a public health pandemic where our communities are literally being decimated in more ways than one by this administration and by the previous administration, quite frankly, is a part of that democratic conversation. And if we cannot have the fundamental right to be able to show up to the election site and cast our ballot in a safe, secure manner, then there's nothing that we can do. That's the bare minimum. And so regardless of who's asking the president to do X, Y, and Z, who's asking Manchin, our consideration is still the same: is that we're going to hold every single elected official in their offices to account for the lack of transparency, the lack of due process, and ultimately the lack of a functioning democracy. We're done with the talking points. We're done with the platitudes and the niceties. We want action. We want tangible results. And right now, we just don't have that. We have gerrymander maps going all throughout the state and all throughout the country. We have, scores and scores of legislative priorities that are showing and demonstrating that the consideration is not for democracy, but it's rather for partisanship and those kinds of things. And so we got a lot of work to do, and we've done our part. We've organized, we've put our money where our mouth was, and now it's time for them to do theirs.
Yeah, Michael, months ago, Biden said that he and his administration were going to take the fight for voting rights on the road. They are finally doing that, but it's only after Build Back Better was completely stopped by Manchin. And they basically said, the Democrats in the Senate have basically said that we're going to have a cooling off here. We're not going to deal with that yet. We're going to move on to the next topic. But is the road show a bit too little too late at this point?
Well, I think you have to try everything, right? If you are going to, you know, uh, give people the right to vote, if you're going to fix this economy, if you are going to, do the things that people elected you to do, then I think you have to throw everything at it. And, whether it's too little, too late, I mean, it's a year into his presidency, let's be honest. And when we're talking about big pieces of legislation, whether it's voting rights or like take Obamacare, for instance, it was like done early in Barack Obama's presidency, but it was March of his second year. So, I know it seems like the Biden administration is failing and they are facing obstruction, but it is relatively early. So, can't say it's too little, too late. It's, so far it's just been too little, but I think there is still time to right the ship and to make the priorities that concern the people who voted you a reality.
Reverend, we learned earlier today, I want to shift gears a little bit here, that Lani Guinier who fought for voting rights and civil rights, passed away at age 71. What are your thoughts on the legacy that she leaves behind?
Well, one, I want to just send my condolences and my love to her family and her community. She is a legend in her own right. And quite frankly, the work that she did, both during the Clinton administration and even as a scholar today, it shows the urgency of what we have before us, is that we need to become very innovative and creative about how we maintain and sustain this thing called democracy, because quite frankly, it is not working. It's not working when we have scores and scores of communities that are underrepresented that are underinvested, that are intentionally disenfranchised and removed from this thing called community. And if we are not able to have our stake in the game, if we're not able to have our communities represented, then this country cannot be its best. And in fact, it becomes very deficient in being able to do quite anything. So with her loss, we really re-urge ourselves, or we remind ourselves to be able to be creative in how we approach compromise and how we approach addressing the real issues and the challenges that our communities face. And with the kind of urgency and the kind of tenacity and the kind of courage that she demonstrated, both when she was being considered to be at the Justice Department, or even as a scholar, to come up with these kinds of solutions so that we all can be successful and that we all can participate in this thing called these United States of America.
I have about a minute, but Michael, I just want to get you to chime in on the loss as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that we remember how she came onto the scene, right? So in 1986, Guinea came to Alabama, to what they call the Black Belt in Alabama, to fight for black voters who were being suppressed, who their vote were being suppressed by the White Citizens Council. And she won that case. And what they were doing was they were challenging those voters' right to cast absentee ballots. And she won that case against a little known attorney called Jeff Sessions. And I think the
Sure.
legacy of that, like we're still living in that reality today. So, it's not like we have to remember way back to things that Lonnie Goodwin gave us. We're still living through them today and still living that reality and that voting rights fight that she fought for so long.
Right. Her work makes her a legend, but I used to run into her almost every summer, and she was also just one of the nicest people that you would ever want to meet. She will be missed. Reverend James Woodall and Michael Harriot, thank you both for joining me tonight.